around beyond me and our audience here. What you see for our most mentally ill citizens on the streets right now, this is the plan. There is no plan. I have talked to county leadership about this, and there is nowhere for anyone to live beyond crisis hotlines and 48-hour stays in the hospital. We have no plan. In Old Town, we know when a new strain of meth has been made and all of the new side effects, like how synthetic ephedrine, known as P2P, induces paranoia and psychosis. So now meth use is resulting in more confrontation and violence than ever before. Like what happened in line getting a free meal at Blanchet House, or in a city-owned parking lot where a brutal beating left a man on life support. We know when fentanyl gets laced in something unexpected because we see an uptick of overdose deaths on our sidewalks. We know those suffering from addiction are being preyed upon by dealers. And keeping all services centralized means there's nowhere safe for them to go, nowhere for them to ever be cared for or receive treatment, or recover without a wolf waiting for them just outside. And we watch it all unfold right in front of us. These last 2 years of COVID closures have been a tipping point. The crushing weight of watching our most vulnerable roam the streets is always hard. But coupled with empty offices and empty storefronts, trash buildup and city infrastructure falling into disrepair, visitors too scared to approach our neighborhood, and drastic cuts and resignations in public safety, a new crowd started making their way to the streets of Old Town, a more dangerous crowd. Over the last 2 years, organized crime has moved into Portland, and organized crime is a business, and businesses move where there's a market opportunity. The market opportunity in Portland is a city divided and in chaos. We're well aware of the public safety shortages in our city, and many of us here today actively spoke out against any further cuts because we knew what would happen. This is what would happen. These new folks that run the street, when agitated by someone having a mental break, they pull out a gun and shoot you point blank, like what happened 3 weeks ago to 26-year-old Jaquan Jenkins on Northwest 2nd and Cooch. Or the drive-by shooting at C3PO on Broadway and Gleason 2 months ago, where 21 rounds were shot, terrorizing the villagers and staff. I know the sound of machine guns. I've seen a fight with hatchets. I've seen drug dealers light people's tents on fire and a woman die of an overdose while being trafficked out of her tent. Half of what we see never gets reported, in part because we know the limitations that have been imposed on every level of law enforcement, and in part because we're tired of feeling we're not to be believed by the world outside of Old Town, that we're exaggerating. I never expected I would see this side of humanity, and I certainly never thought I would have to worry about being believed. But Portland is divided, and we cannot seem to agree on what is humane any longer. Please believe me when I say that leaving everything and everyone as they are is not humane. We must take action in our community, in our bureaus, in elected office, to repair, rebuild, and reopen Old Town. I would like to hand it over to Elizabeth Nye of the Lansdowne Gardens to share their organization's experience and the need for these goals and actions.
Thank you for coming to Old Town today. I'd like to begin by briefly recognizing the importance of this place to our city. Old Town and the new Chinatown, Japantown Historic District was once home to the largest population of Cantonese Chinese outside of San Francisco. It was also one of 2 Japantowns in Portland. From the 1850s to the 1950s, Old Town was also home to large numbers of Irish, Germans, Scandinavians, African Americans, Greeks, Sephardic and Russian Jews, Filipinos, and Roma. Today, Old Town is home to cultural organizations dedicated to uplifting the voices of immigrants and others who have suffered and those who continue to suffer discrimination and indignity. Local government's inability to safeguard Old Town disrespects this history, and it is particularly devastating to our houseless neighbors who deserve more from their government. Old Town deserves better. As you can see by those of us who are gathered here this morning, this neighborhood is doing all that we can, but we need the full and immediate support from our leaders. The reality is, Old Town is not a safe place today. 3 weeks ago, as our staff prepared to welcome guests and visitors for the last Sunday of our Chinese New Year festival, they discovered an abandoned car parked across right outside of Lansu, and it was smeared with blood all along the side of it. This was not the worst of it. we came to learn that overnight one of our houseless neighbors was severely, brutally beaten in his tent. The violence was traumatic for everyone involved, for those who responded to it, those who witnessed it, and most importantly for the man who tragically died from it in his hospital days later, surrounded by his mother and his sister. James Weiss, also known as Tony, deserved better. The people here deserve better. Old Town deserves better. We need to do whatever we can to address the violence that we witness every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I've been told that solving many of the problems plaguing Old Town will take time. But I also know there are steps local government can take today that will make Old Town safer. As Portland's oldest neighborhood, home to immigrants who overcame decades of discrimination and indignity, and today home to so many who are fighting just to stay alive, we must do whatever we can to respond to the crisis of humanity unfolding around us. And we must do it today. Thank you.
I'd like to have my old friend Mark Wells from Clean and Safe come and talk to you about Downtown Clean and Safe's experience and their need for the cleanliness goals in action.
There's an entry. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Elizabeth. And good morning, Old Town residents and businesses. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Mark Wells, and I'm the Executive Director of Downtown Portland Clean and Safe and the Vice President of Downtown Services for the Portland Business Alliance. I've had the great privilege of working with and for many Old Town businesses and residents for well over a decade. First as a City Crime Prevention Coordinator, and for the past year as Director of Portland's oldest Enhanced Service District. The Old Town community, along with many others in the downtown area, have been sounding the alarm for years of the deteriorating conditions in livability, cleanliness, and safety. Downtown Portland Clean and Safe stands proudly with you, the Old Town community, to do all we can within our resources to start a journey of repair and regrowth, aid and comfort for our most vulnerable community members, and to allow Old Town to thrive and prosper while enjoying what is everyone's right, a clean and safe community for everyone to enjoy. As we embark on this 90-day pilot project to clean, rebuild, and revitalize Old Town, I would like to acknowledge and thank our dedicated, hardworking vendors at Clean and Safe who are on duty every day, 7 days a week. We have our amazing cleaners from Central City Concern. They're over here in the back. Yeah, round of applause for our cleaners. Absolutely. Who have some of the most difficult jobs imaginable, picking up thousands of needles, tons and tons of trash, and working to enhance our basic city services. Next, we have our dedicated security professionals on hand from Portland Patrol who work in often dangerous and challenging situations to support our community. Thank you for your continued service and coming to work every day to meet these challenges head on. I would also like to thank Corrine Perkins from the city's graffiti abatement program with the Office of Civic Life for her overwhelming support for this pilot project, and a hardworking Paul Watts from Graffiti Removal Services for you and your team's skills and services removing years' worth of graffiti. Next, I'd like to thank the Portland Police Bureau and the dedicated police bike unit. You are invaluable to this community, and we support you, and we thank you for your continued service to our city and Old Town. Lastly, my sincere thanks and admiration to the thousands of Old Town community members and your community leadership here today who have not given up. You have remained here through years of challenge and frustration, never wavering on supporting your fellow neighbor and business. Clean and Safe and I are humbled to play a role in this plan, and we are excited to continue our partnership and see what can be done. I walk and drive from downtown, the downtown core, into Old Town almost every day. And as I cross over Burnside Street, I cannot, and we as a city must not, and should no longer accept the vast and decades-old disparity of the conditions that have existed for way too long. We must all, the community and our local government, working in genuine and full partnership, work tirelessly to eliminate this divide. As we have for almost 3 decades, Clean and Safe will do our best to support the Old Town community and partner with the city in their efforts to hopefully bring real and tangible change to this historic part of our collective downtown. Thank you again for being here. It's my pleasure to hand the presentation over to Old Town resident Leonard Keck.
moving down this beautiful working level. I moved here to Old Town in 2017, and when I did get down here, I was using a walker. And as my medical condition increased and got worse, I had to, it got harder to use the walker. So I basically just kind of stayed in my room for about 8 months to a year until I was able to get this chair. And then once I got the chair, man, I was like a free bird. I was gone. Couldn't stop me. Everywhere. All through the neighborhood, looking at beautiful architecture of this area, up in the park blocks, going for lunch, making a lunch and going up there. And but the last couple years, it's I do have the ability to get out of my building and stuff, but I don't really starting to lose the desire because of the tents. It's hard for me to get on the sidewalks. Half the time I have to go down the middle of the street in traffic. As people have mentioned before, the violence, any loud noises, constant arguing with people. I've seen people burn people out of tents. I've seen assaults. It's just not really fun to be living in Old Town right now. So that's pretty much it.
Switch their mics over. Thanks, Lenny and Elizabeth and Mark. In closing, I want to share cities are ecosystems and must be in balance to survive. City infrastructure was not built for any part of it to fall into this level of disrepair, to this level of filth, this level of danger, this level of inaccessibility. And certainly, city infrastructure never intended for humans to live on its sidewalks. And the ugly truth is that nature is taking over. Rats have begun chewing through people's tents, eating them while they're sleeping. TriMet staff recently came across a man with no feet in his tent because his wheelchair had been stolen. He couldn't leave. Organized crime rings are trafficking our neighbors for sex and some for drugs, and the consequences of making the wrong move are brutal violence or even death. And make no mistake that these same organized crime rings are also living on the street, because they know Portlanders can't always differentiate between the predator and the prey. And while our ecosystem has obvious areas we can address, we must care about the health and survival of all parts of our ecosystem, which of course include our vulnerable houseless neighbors, but also our housed neighbors like Lenny, our shopkeepers and our museums, our college students and our visitors, our office workers and our nonprofits. We all play a role in keeping a city and county ecosystem healthy, and we all must acknowledge that the other matters and be willing to advocate for every part of this ecosystem in order to regain balance. We are struggling in Portland to decide who is more important, and the answer is no one is more important, but we must be in balance. I come to the table assuming everyone, regardless of political affiliation, at their core is both progressive and compassionate, meaning they want things to be better than they were before and they care about other humans. There's a lot of talk in Portland about what is humane, and armchair critics are quick to point out the inhumanity of others. By definition, a humane person is one who shows great compassion and caring for others, and who tries whenever possible to alleviate another's suffering. A humane citizen would never be okay with these conditions for anyone. And if we have options that are more humane than the sidewalk, we should be cheering leadership on, not criticizing how the option is not perfect. We have let perfect become the enemy of good. We have allowed the critic to count too much. We stop moving forward when the critic calls out how the doer of deeds could have done them better. And this must stop. We are better than this. We are smarter than this. We are a city that has excelled in excellence in food and craft, and it is time we seek excellence in policy and thought, and most of all, courage. If you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done. My staff at the hotels tease me that I make a lot of nautical references when I talk about teamwork, and I'll tell you what I tell everyone. Like it or not, as a city, a county, and a neighborhood, we are in the same boat. And if we hope to move forward, we must start rowing in the same direction. Otherwise, we will continue to spin in circles in one spot. And it's a team sport to save a city. And with this, the Old Town community has come together in our boat, and committed to row together toward greater safety, cleanliness, and accessibility in the name of what is humane. We invite Portlanders, our bureaus, and our elected leadership to join with us in row. Thank you. And I would like to let everyone know immediately following this, Paul Watts from Graffiti Removal Services will be demonstrating a graffiti cleanup across the street. And if you're interested in volunteering with us, to please follow up with someone at that table back there. And now I'd like to open it up for any questions, if anyone has any. Thank you. So the question is that our press release indicates laying out a series of goals and how do we plan to accomplish them. So I want to be clear that the list of goals came to be because we have a weekly call with the mayor's office, and they were laying out some of the fall bump money, what was going to be happening, that we would have weekly tent counts, that there would be increased IRP teams, a series of activities. And I asked the question, I don't care what you do all day, what do you hope to accomplish? I think sometimes we're so into data collection that we don't actually care about what the outcome is. And everyone knows all these references that knows me in the audience, but you need to begin with the end in mind, right? I believe it's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. Where are we going with this? And so I asked the question, what's the goal? And they said it was up to us. We get to decide the goal. So the Old Town Community Association for the last 7 years has done strategic planning, and we update it each year. And these came, Old Town being a safe, clean, and accessible neighborhood was one of the areas in our strategic plan. And then our community association laid out some short-term and long-term goals. They're assigned to bureaus. Some of it we can do, but if we're being asked by the city, what are your goals? I am assuming, what are your goals for us? Because we don't have resources to do these things. And theoretically, cities should be able to take care of their stuff. Yes, the city and every bureau actually has this document. And truthfully, I've been pretty encouraged. A lot of folks have been excited to have something tangible to work on. Honestly, the graffiti office was like, we could totally accomplish this goal. We just need everyone's waivers. And I was like, I'm not sure everyone knows you need a waiver to have graffiti removed from your building. So we pounded the pavement and collected every single property owner's waiver. And Paul got started right away, and that's why it happened. There are some areas where there are major gaps, but it should be the responsibility of city and county leadership and their bureaus. We'll fill in where we see there's a breakdown. Anything else?
2 questions. Number
Yeah.
1,
Oh, sorry, 1 second. Go ahead. Has the city accepted the goals? Well, when I first submitted these, which were approved by our board, it was initially suggested that everyone on this call, which is sort of a random smattering of folks from different bureaus and, University of Oregon, who's also on our board, it was suggested we take it back and get approval from all of those groups too. And I told the mayor's office, Old Town is the official representatives of the Old Town community. So I don't actually care if everyone endorses this, or I said they can endorse it, but I don't care if you support it. You can back us up, but you asked us to write the goals. So it doesn't actually matter to me if anyone accepts it. If you're asking us to do the work, I said you might regret asking us to write the goals because it is then expected that this is your deliverable. So I can't totally answer it. I just said, this is what is then. What's your question?
so 2 questions. One is general philosophical, I think. It seems remarkable that you've had to come together to do this, to get the city to take action. What's that been like? How frustrating? Is it a failure of leadership?
I think it's hard to be a leader in Portland right now. And being in a leadership position for a lot of my life, I know that it's particularly scary when the world is shifted and people can show up to your house and threaten you. And I think that really puts you on your heels of how to make bold decisions. What I've told a lot of people in Portland is that you need to be willing to back up maybe what feels like the unpopular opinion so that your leadership know that you support it. Yes, this is unprecedented. No, I never thought that I would see this. But I also never thought I'd see a pandemic. I also thought I'd never see the side of humanity, but here we are. And so all I ask is that leadership show up. If it's hard to be brave, I'm willing to provide some of my courage for them to conjure up theirs.
And then the second question is more specific. With the clearance you're talking about on the sidewalks, it seems like all the tents would be gone. Should we look forward to seeing that soon?
That's not actually my, I never say this, but that's above my pay grade to actually decide that and enforce that. That for me, it was important that I didn't actually say anything in the goals about homelessness, because I think Portland struggles with differentiating between judgment and enforcement. I don't judge anyone's life circumstances, but I do see things that are not legal. Something that's really hard for people to reconcile in this neighborhood that's here every day, that we get parking tickets, and also I see a hatchet fight like 2 hours later. That is the craziest thing to reconcile in your mind. So there's a disparity there that, yes, we need somewhere for people to go. Also, we could have places for people to go fairly quickly. Portland needs to have as many loud voices supporting that as there are critics shouting that it's not perfect. So, any other questions?
Would you have built your hotel? Would you have fixed it up knowing what you know today back then?
Sure. I love a challenge. Who would have known? I mean, Old Town wasn't perfect even 10 years ago when we bought this building. And I came because, I started my small business career in Kenton, which when I started, I owned Posey's Bakery and Cafe before, and there were like 3 businesses down there. I find community development fascinating. I think it's super fun to rally people together, and this is the stuff that people live for, right? To have people together. I didn't expect any of you to show up today, so this is amazing. People want to do meaningful work. They want to follow something that's going in the right direction. So, probably.
Are city and county leaders doing enough now?
I don't know. I think that there's a lot that could be done, and our issue is always enforcement, right? You can have tons of ideas, but you've gotta get to the enforcement of whatever your plan is. Were there any other questions? Cole Reed.
Yes. How many people have we lost since January 1st? I think that
Businesses or lives?
Deaths.
Oh.
We have these fatalities, and they're not really being talked about. The local business owner just a few days ago was hit with a hammer during the day. How many people do we know offhand that we've lost since January 1st? Like, let's give the public the
Yeah,
numbers.
that's a great. Do you know that number? I don't actually know that number.
Not since January. I've been trying to get it.
3 deaths on the street.
Wow.
Any other questions? Say that again.
How many businesses are fleeing other places because of the city isn't acting on the inhumanity that's happening in Old?
So the question is, how many businesses are leaving Old Town? That's a hard stat. I know that we just lost Upper Playground. I know that Starbucks is not coming back. I know Airbnb left even before this. There's a lot. And you don't actually have to count, you can just walk the streets. The number of vacancies is a testament to what we're losing. And we're working hard. I asked Portland Police once, what's the number one thing that we could do to help with our public safety and cleanliness and activating the streets? And he said, activate storefronts and pick up the trash. That would help the most. And so we actually got funding to hire someone to recruit businesses to help us activate our storefronts, because there is a disproportionate amount of vacancy here. Go ahead.
Just one other question. What we should be telling our audience is then, for your goals here, are you folks actually going to be implementing these goals, or are you calling on the police to implement them?
Well, some of them we can, right? So we can't actually, unless we just stop reporting, we can't actually decrease the crime stats. But we are calling on the city and county leadership to join us. It's not normal that citizens are doing this, but we recognize that the city's struggling, the county is struggling. And I keep saying county because I will not let the county get a pass. Is that your phone, Lenny? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, they left a couple years ago. Their headquarters are now in Canada. But I just want to finish answering the question of what are we expecting. So what we need, so for example, the crime stats decreasing, and we recognize we don't have, I don't know if everyone realizes this, because I just talked to some folks at the county and they didn't totally realize this. In total, including office staff and investigators, we have less than 1,000 police officers in Portland. In cars that show up to your calls, there are less than 400 officers for the entire Portland metro area. I don't think people realize that. So there are people that are saying we need to cut things more, and then they're also upset that there's a slow response time. And I'm not sure what dots people are connecting, but those dots don't go together. There aren't enough people. So this is what people were testifying against, not getting to this place, and here we are. And I'll tell you, on that city council call, 176 people to testify. 10 of us of that 176 said, please do not cut anything further, because we know we're down here, we're in Old Town, please don't do this. The other 166 were like, excuse my language, but they said, fuck the police, fuck you, leadership. And here we are. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I was just wondering if you've run into any issues with Portland's bureau system and different bureaus thinking it's other bureaus.
Oh my gosh, are you a plant? The question is, have we run into any issues with bureaus? I'm so glad you asked that question. He is not a plant. I don't even know who it is. But yes, we have run into issues with various bureaus. We actually asked Prosper if they would be willing to do a study for us. Not for recent issues, but just why has Old Town struggled throughout history? And the report came back that Old Town has struggled because of inconsistent commitment from the Bureau of Transportation and Prosper Portland. You can read the study online. Econ Northwest did the report. But it's really interesting to see. The Bureau of Transportation has been really hard for us. You'll actually see in the goals with accessibility. 2 of the accessibility goals, they couldn't be more specific, but it's like, you can't get into Old Town off of Burnside. Could you please leave the left turn? And also, can you move a planter? So, yes, we have had a lot. And it's not just the bureaus blame each other. In Portland right now, everyone blames each other. What I think would be incredibly meaningful is for the community to reflect on themselves and think of what could I do or what could other people do, and think past the first step, right? I hear a lot of people share talking points. A lot of people have said, oh, we just need lower barrier shelters. And I asked someone, I was like, have you thought beyond that thought? Who's gonna work there? I have a night audit that worked at a low barrier shelter and was brutally attacked 4 times before he quit. You will never get staff to work there. So after that step of that talking point, what is the solution? I don't see anyone coming up with meaningful solutions and thinking past one bright idea. So Portland needs to do a lot of self-reflection. Citizens need to get off of their, soapboxes and super safe neighborhoods. I'm sick of the armchair critics. I tell everyone, my husband made me take out of the press release the one quote I was gonna put in, that I was like, if anyone doesn't believe me, meet me in Old Town, any day, anytime. And we will just stand outside in one spot for 15 minutes, and you see how much you can take. And we won't walk, because walking is safer. You will stand in one spot and see what you can take. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much for coming. This is very exciting. And if you would like to see some graffiti removal, please join Paul over here across the street. I'd like to give a big shout out to all of the Clean and Safe officers and cleaners. Thank you guys. And I really want to tell all of the residents that live here full time too, that we see you and we know how hard this is. And it's probably the biggest reason that I am willing to stand in front of everyone is I get to go home somewhere else every night, but I know you guys don't. So thanks for standing by me. Thanks everybody.